Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I'm assuming it's the afternoon when you're watching this, but it's the afternoon when I'm filming, so let's just go with it. So today's video is going to be all about buying a property and all of the costs which you could possibly imagine which will be involved in buying a property. Now, I'm going to break it down for you and tell you all of the costs that I incurred, but I'm also going to notify you of any other costs which could be incurred which I didn't have to pay personally. So it's easy when buying a first place or buying a property to think that the deposit may be the only thing that you need. And I'll hold my hands up and say that besides thinking I may need a few £100s for solicitor, legal fees, I had no clue of any other fee which were involved in buying a property besides the deposit. So I was quite surprised when I had a massive list of all of these fees that I had to pay. So I thought I'd break it down for you and make it really easy so that you have an idea as to what you need to save, because it's certainly not just the deposit. You will need to save a considerable higher amount than the deposit just to make sure you have enough to cover everything else. So I went through my completion statement for you this afternoon and wrote down all of the fees that I incurred and the order that I incurred them into so that you can have an understanding of what you may need to save. Also, to give you an overview, I purchased my property and it was £200,000. It was a new build and I was a first time buyer when purchasing this. So a few of the costs which I'm about to mention may not apply to you, or they may apply to you but maybe a higher amount or a lower amount. It all depends on the solicitor you're using, the developer you're using, and if you're a first time buyer or not. So let's start by the reservation fee. So the reservation fee is a fee which is typically for a new build site, and because I had a new build, I had to reserve the plot before I was able to go through the mortgage process and put my name on the plot, because when I was buying mine, it wasn't actually built. It was literally just a drawing plan and I had to put my name on that plan. So it was a case of reserving that property from outset. So my reservation fee was £500 and I paid that around 7 months before completion, before getting the keys to my property. The time frame between paying a reservation fee and completing will totally depend on the developer that you're going with. It could be 1 month, it could be 2 months, it could be a year, it could be 2 years. You'll have to speak to your developer and find out how long it's going to be until your property is built, because it may already be built, it may be nowhere near being built. But mine personally was around 7 months before I completed. And I knew this was roughly the timescale at outset. I mean, they can never be certain on the deadlines, but mine was within a month or two of the date that they anticipated. So once I reserved the property and I did all my mortgage paperwork and I was accepted, I then had to appoint a solicitor, and at this point they asked for a payment on account, and that was a small amount of £375, and that is just to confirm to them that you've given them some money so they can trust that you are using them throughout the whole process and that they're not going to do all of the work and not get any of the fees back. I guess that's how it works. So it's basically almost like a deposit for your solicitor to say, yes, here's a little bit of the money, I'll pay you the rest at completion. So that was another £375 I paid within about 6 weeks of reserving my property. So between reserving the property and paying them 2 fees, there was nothing else at all until completion. So when you complete on a property, especially with a new build, you'll typically pay your fees 2 weeks before completion. So all of the fees are written down here for you. So to give you a total, first off, the total fees that I had to pay excluding my deposit were £3,471.72, and that covered my legal fees, my ground rent and my service charge. So I'm going to go through all of them now in full detail so you can have an understanding. So out of the solicitor fees, which everyone has a solicitor, of course, you have to for all the paperwork and to make that property legally yours, there's a vast number of different things they have to do. So I've broken them all down for you. So firstly, there was a professional charge, and this is just for the administration, all of the paperwork they do, etc. Mine was £762. I was then charged for them acting on behalf of the lender, i.e. them acting on behalf of my bank that was, lending me the money, and that was £144. Because I then used the Help to Buy, there was additional paperwork they had to complete, and that cost me another £300 for the administration of that. There was then a HMRC land registry search which cost me £5, and there was a local authority search which was £108. There was also a HMR land registration fee of £270. There was an anti-money laundering fee, which is basically checking your identity, and that was £10. And then there was a telegraphic transfer fee. Basically, when I paid the deposit to them, I sent it by bank transfer, and for them to tally everything up at their ends, they charged me £25 for the pleasure of that. They then charged me £55 for random administration such as post and emails, and then they charged me an additional £50 for the stamp duty land tax form. despite the fact I didn't have any tax to pay, they still have to complete the forms. They charged me £50 for the pleasure of doing so. Now, not all of them fees incurred VAT, you know, value added tax at 20%, although for the most part they did. So I did round that figure up from £1,719 to £2,062.80 with the 20% VAT, because 99% of the fees will have VAT added to them. So I couldn't remember the exact breakdown, so I just, you know, put VAT at 20% on the entire sum. In addition to that, if you have a flat, you will also have to pay ground rent and also a service charge. Now, if you're buying a new build development, you pretty much always have to pay ground rent anyway, because there'll be lots of different areas around which are communal, such as greenery bits, you know, maybe a playground, things like that. And the people that built the site will then have a maintenance company which come in every month or so and cut the grass, that sort of thing. So even if you have a house, you still have to pay the ground rent. And mine is £183.75 a year. The amount depends on how big your property is. Typically, if you have a house, you actually pay more. I believe on this site I'm living at, it's about £250 for a house, so it depends on where you live, but typically a flat is actually cheaper for ground rent. If you have a flat, you then have something called a service charge, and that is basically to cover the stairwell part, the parts that you don't own and the parts that they have to go in and clean and maintain and paint and all the things like that. And mine is £1,225.17 a year, which is quite a lot of money. And I didn't actually know that I had to pay that at the end, at completion. I thought that was a monthly fee. So it was much to my surprise to find out I had to pay that. That was a massive shock to me, and I was quite annoyed actually at the time that I had to pay that. So definitely make sure that you check with the developer if you can pay it monthly or not, because that was a shock to me, and it was something that I didn't bother checking, which in hindsight I wish I did check. So in addition to that, I obviously have my deposit, and because my property was £200,000 and I did the Help to Buy, my deposit was £10,000. Now, if you remember from earlier in the story, I paid £500 reservation fee, so they took that off straight away, and I had £9,500 left to pay. So as I said, at completion, I had my £9,500 deposit left to pay, then I had £3,471.72. Now, I would like to note that Redrow, my developers, were very kind and gave me £1,000 towards my legal fees. This was an incentive at outset, so that came off that £3,471 figure that I just told you about. So that was an incentive when I bought my house. The incentives are constantly changing day to day, week to week. You can never be certain as to what incentive you're going to get, other than when you sign the paperwork and they tell you, you know, there and then, if you go ahead today, this is what we're going to give you. For me, it was £1,000 towards my legal fees, so that really did help me out. But as I say, every developer is different. Some will give you that, some will give you nothing, some will give you so much more. Just depends on who you go with. Another thing that really helped me out is the mortgage I went with actually had cashback available of £250, so that instantly came off the figure that I owed as well, which was obviously really, really handy as well, because it saved me £250. So at the time, I thought the cashback just went straight into my bank account and I'd have the cash back, but no, it doesn't work like that. It comes off the figure that you owe your solicitors. Another fee that you may incur, which I didn't personally incur, would be a mortgage broker fee, and I didn't have to pay this because Redrow, the developers, referred me to a mortgage broker, and it was all done free of charge, inclusive of the service. Now, sometimes you will have to pay this. It depends on if it's a new build, if they have an agreement in place and doing it for free, etc. You'll have to check that with your developers if you're getting a new build, and if you're not getting a new build, you probably will have to pay it. So mortgage fees can vary. I can't give you an exact figure, but they're typically between £250 to around the £500 mark. So that's another thing to consider, and you typically would pay that fee, I believe, at the point of the mortgage being set up. But you'll have to check that because I didn't have to pay that fee. But it's another fee you have to consider and should really have at outset at the point of picking the property you want to go and buy. So I'm now going to get onto the additional fees, which I didn't incur for the most part, but they're definitely things that you will need to consider. So the next thing is stamp duty, and stamp duty has been abolished for first-time buyers if the property is under £300,000. So that is a really, really good thing. Obviously, I didn't have to pay any stamp duty. Whoopie-doo, I was really pleased about that. So if you're buying a property above £300,000, make sure you calculate online what your stamp duty is going to be, because that's another fee you're going to have to pay at completion. If you're not a first-time buyer, then you're certainly going to have stamp duty. So just simply go online and type in stamp duty calculator, and it's really, really easy. There are so many websites. I typically recommend using the government HMRC websites because obviously they're the best ones to have because they're the ones that make all the rules at the end of the day. So other random fees which you may need to consider are things such as moving fees for furniture. Now, I was lucky in fact that I had my mum and dad to kind of help cart stuff around here with me, and I really only had little bits and pieces. So we didn't need a van, a removal van or anything like that. We just used our cars to bring stuff back and forth until it was all here. But if you're living somewhere with lots of furniture already, you may need to consider removal fees, and that's typically, I believe, about £200 based on the people I know. So that's another little fee that you have to consider. And then another fee you need to consider is if you're actually selling your residence and then you're buying a new property, so if you're not a first-time buyer, you're also going to incur fees when you're selling the property, which are estate agent fees. And estate agent fees really do vary on the company. They can be a fixed amount, they can be percentage, they can be tiered. So the first X amount of value is charged at this and then at this. Typically, I believe they are around the £2,000 to £4,000 mark, but it totally depends on the value of a property, who you're going with and their charging structure. So do not quote me on that. You'll have to go and do your research yourself. But just be mindful that if you have got a property already and you're selling it, you will incur fees selling the property. And unfortunately, if you're buying your second property, you will still have to pay stamp duty. So if you paid stamp duty on your first property, say 5 years ago, you're not exempt the next time round. You'll have to pay stamp duty again on that second property. Something that I incurred, which was very expensive, was flooring. Now, when I first reserved this property with Redrow, well, let's take it back actually. Before officially reserving the property, Redrow included flooring in the package, and that was great. That was going to be a really expensive flooring worth about £4,000 to £5,000, and I was delighted to have that. Now, with properties, before you can get your mortgage, there's a surveyor, and they will survey the property and work out the value and if the developer is charging what they should or not. It turns out the properties were actually overpriced for what they were, apparently anyway, so Redrow had to drop the prices of the property, and in doing so they had to remove most of the incentives. So flooring was actually removed, but at this point my heart was so set on getting this apartment that I just had to kind of go with it, and that meant that at the end I had to find someone to do my flooring myself. I found someone quite locally who I already knew to fit the flooring, and then I bought the flooring online on a website called UK Flooring Direct. It was the most affordable flooring I could find of the colour and design that I liked, and I spent about £1,900 doing my flooring. So the flooring, the underlay, for all the entire property with the fitting cost was £1,900. So that's quite a substantial sum that you need to consider also as well. And unless I have been really stupid and missed something out, I believe that is all the costs which can be incurred. If I have left anything out, please do comment in the box below, because I'll feel really silly, and I would obviously want you guys to talk amongst yourself and notify others, but I really hope that this was everything. And I really hope you enjoyed and found this video helpful. If there's any other property videos that you'd like me to film, or saving videos, or anything financial related, please let me know. I would love to film it for you. So thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, please give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye everyone.